Kia ora and welcome everyone from wherever you are around the world. I know some of you are very early there in India. I'm going to start straight off. How often have we avoided conversations in our lives? You know, we see something, we hear something, you know, we even feel something isn't quite right, but we don't speak up. So I want hands up, or you can put an emoji or a Y in the chat for those people who feel comfortable having uncomfortable conversations. Come on, put your hand up. Oh, Pavel, you love having those. There's not too many that love having uncomfortable conversations. You know, most of us try to avoid them because we fear what the repercussions might be. And so therefore we tend not to speak up a little bit. But the past couple of years have opened up conversations and the importance of being more courageous when it comes to having those conversations. So I want you to do a little bit of homework here for me first. I want you to write down, so find a piece of paper and a pen, or you might be on a computer. What is an uncomfortable conversation that you've had in the workplace? Maybe just write down one or two. What are some uncomfortable conversations you've had in the workplace? And by the way, it's so good to see you there, Trisha. I haven't seen you for a while, and a few others like Phil and Dr. Rao. So what is an uncomfortable conversation that you've had in the workplace? Just write one or two down. Once you've done that, I want you to think, what is an uncomfortable conversation that you didn't have? Could be personal relationship, could be in the workplace. What's an uncomfortable conversation that you didn't have? Now, I want you to look at those, the differences between those two, you know, ones that you felt that you had and ones you didn't have. What were the differences in the way you felt in each of those situations? How did you feel when you had the uncomfortable conversation versus those that you didn't have? What was the difference in how you felt? And I'm going to give an opportunity for someone to share. So would someone like to share what was an uncomfortable conversation you had, what was one you didn't have, and then what was the differences in the way you felt? So if someone would like to mute yourself and share with us, you can be courageous. Who would like to go? We've got no volunteers today. Okay, Trisha, if you want to unmute yourself, thank you.
I guess an uncomfortable conversation that I have had was giving feedback to participants who believed their skill set was probably far greater than it was. So having to give some honest feedback to that. And yeah, that was uncomfortable because they certainly weren't open to it and they didn't really want to hear it. In terms of the one I haven't yet had, that would be giving feedback to a more senior person.
Okay, and you're feeling in, okay, once you delivered that uncomfortable conversation, how did you feel afterwards?
Oh, they were ultimately appreciative of it. But yeah, it doesn't feel great. It certainly is an uncomfortable feeling. But I guess ultimately that's the role that I had. So I needed to give it. So my feeling was I'd done what I needed to do. But yeah, clearly they were uncomfortable. They weren't happy about receiving it initially.
Okay. And the one you haven't shared yet, how are you feeling about that right now? Do you feel a little bit stressed? What emotion? What's
to be honest, I just don't want to have it. Part of me just goes, part of me is, I really don't want to have the conversation, and I'm not sure that the outcome, I'm not really clear yet on what the outcome I want to have is. So there's a bit of, there's a lack of clarity around, if I have it, is it going to get me to where I need to get to?
Okay, very good. Thank you for sharing. Trisha, let's give a big round of applause. Thank you. And there are many reasons why we may need to have uncomfortable conversations. It could be, our gut instinct doesn't feel right. Maybe our clients are not up to the standard. Maybe we need to inform a supplier that due to the economy, we don't require their services anymore. Maybe you have a different viewpoint, or it could even be trying to get people back into the office. So there are lots of reasons, but we need the tools to have those courageous conversations. And, there's going to be tough conversations we need to have, but we need to be able to pass those tools on to other people as well to help them out. I want you to put into the chat, what happens for you, or what happens when people don't speak up, or what actually happens if we don't speak up, where we've got something uncomfortable, we're unsure about something, maybe we have a different perspective, we're sitting on that. I want you to pop into the chat, what happens when people don't speak up? What's going on? We build resentment, overthink the situation. Great, Phil, love it. Conflict of emotions, Dr. Rao. Rob, thoughts, emotions, feelings can fester, lead to resentment. Okay, good. The problem persists. You never know if they're happy or not. I'm not sure who that is, but Sonia, problem persists. Paval, they might feel overlooked, unimportant. Natasha, pay now, pay later with interest always builds and gets worse. Rain, missing a chance for improvement. Great. So generally what we find a lot of things will happen is you will turn a molehill into a mountain, right? You ruminate on that uncomfortable conversation you need, you sit on it, and in your mind, you start making judgments on how that person's going to react, how are they going to perceive you, and actually really what it is. So the longer we wait, the more of a challenge it becomes, because we actually create something bigger than what it is. But I want you to write now in the chat, what is the result when people don't speak up? What is the result when people don't speak up? Yeah, Dr. Rao, one day the volcano erupts, 100%. So what is the result when people don't speak up? What could be the outcome if you don't speak up? What are some examples? All right, lots of thinking going on here. They're afraid of communication barriers, conflict evolutions, people resign and leave. Great. Haunts forever. Decisions are made without info, missed opportunities. Excellent. Yep, mistakes can happen. We may miss the bigger picture. Tension might be created. Talent might be unseen. Or even people don't feel like they belong. So I want you to think, what effect can that have on a relationship or even the company culture? So as a result of people not speaking up, what effect can that have on a relationship or even the company culture? And so I want you just to think about that. We want every single person in an organization to be in a position to speak up, feel safe, and have that permission. Because we don't want to run the risk of toxic communication, mental health issues, lost opportunities, broken relationships, and negative culture. It's our role today to arm you and your people with the tools to have uncomfortable conversations, as we want people to have conversations and not confrontations. So what is a courageous conversation? Well, maybe first let's have a look at what we are not going to talk about today. So when it comes to looking at courageous conversations, we're not talking about conflict management today. We're not talking about tension or unacceptable behavior, negative reactions, bad news, the vulnerable conversations, the negotiating, resolving conflict, handling complaints, or even managing up. We do these in a program called Leading Powerful Conversations. But today we are going to focus on this key area. And I want you to understand what this is. So for us, we are focusing on, you're in a one-on-one or a group meeting situation, and you're not sure if that you should speak up or even how to speak. All right. So you're in a meeting, either one-on-one or with a group. You're not sure if you should speak up or even how you should speak up. And it might be something that's uncomfortable, could be unsure about something, or you even have a different perspective. So let's have a look at those. Uncomfortable about what people are saying or have said, right? It could be a behavior thing. It could be unsure about what about the approach or direction a conversation is taking. You know, sometimes we sit there and we just feel unsure about where it's heading. We want some clarity. And then the third one here is to look at a different perspective. You know, there's potentially another approach and you would like to share, but you're not quite sure how you should do that. But we need to realize that a lot of discomfort comes around conversations when in our mind, things are left unsaid. And when they're left unsaid, the long-term effects lead to catastrophe. And we need to remove that unnecessary stress in a workplace. But we also need permission. You know, we need permission. We need permission for ourselves to speak up, or the company needs to provide us permission. You know, we know that when people speak up, there is somewhat of an emotional release, right? We build all this tension up inside of us. And then when we do share it, we're just like, oh, it's a big relief. It's like a weight comes off our shoulders. And so we need to make sure that tension is not building up. But what we know of high-performing teams, a common characteristic that is very rarely talked about, is the ability of the team to talk about something that's uncomfortable and be able to speak up quickly and openly. And the key difference between a high-performing team and someone that's not is that everyone is able to separate the problem from the person. Okay, so when it comes to uncomfortable conversations, high-performing teams will speak up quickly and openly, plus they will also separate the problem from the person. And we're going to talk a little bit about how this might work. Now, I know this firsthand. I was fortunate enough to be in New Zealand's longest unbeaten sport streak, where we went 272 games unbeaten with a field hockey team. And that was the Stratford men's hockey team. We went 16 years unbeaten. We had a lot of personalities. We had very diverse team, lots and lots of opinions. And we shared sometimes some very, in a heated, tense way, that what we were unsure about, what we were uncertain about, and whether we had a different opinion. Now, we were able to quickly sort everything out and move on. We didn't have that time or space to allow tension and stress to build up. If we had, it would have detracted us from what we needed to do to win and be at our best. And so it's important that we also know when not to share. And I'm going to share a little bit about that later on. But how do we create permission? I want you to help me out here. So I want you in the chat, I want you to share for me what would be a rule or two, or maybe even three rules that you believe would need to be in place in a company for you to feel comfortable enough to have uncomfortable conversations without fear of retribution. All right. So from a company point of view, what do you think would be one, two, or three rules that are required so that you have permission to share those uncomfortable conversations without fear of retribution? So pop those in the chat. What do you think? Rules for permission for people to speak up. Gabriella, care about feedback, transparency, and be willing to do something about it. Okay, great. Love those. Thank you, Gabby. Who else? One, two, or three rules of permission. Some of you thought you were just coming along to listen today. Got to do a bit of heavy lifting today. Trisha, psychological safety. Very good. Janelle, not a rule, but more a behavior. Leadership has to demonstrate they're open and doing it too. Fantastic. So important. Natasha, policies that support. Practices from the top, no blame. Sarah, awareness of psychological safety embedded in the organization. Leaders, role modeling. Gabby, debate over idea versus judgmental. Okay, awesome. Love these. Really, really good. Keep them coming. When it comes into that creating a culture where people can have uncomfortable conversations, I find these three things are really valuable to have. So the first one is obviously safety. We've had that. People feel safe about speaking up, so we need to create that space. Two, we need to create invitations for everyone in the meeting to have an opportunity to speak up. And we also need to make sure we actually have the space and the time, space and the time for people to speak up. If we don't have those, it's really, really difficult for people to have that opportunity. What happens when we delay a conversation, at uncomfortable conversations? It's really interesting. When I think about this, I want people to realize in most cases, leaders actually have the belief that if you're in the room already for a meeting, that they expect you to speak up and not to wait for someone to ask you. Now, that is a common belief that many leaders have. They may not show that, and they may not, the employees may not feel that permission, but it is something that you need to understand as individuals, that in most cases, the leaders actually have already given you permission in their head, but they may just not be showing it. And so from a leader's perspective, it's important that they have awareness that everyone is being heard. They are observing people's behaviors. They allocate that time and space for other people's ideas and opinions. They reserve judgment when people share. They listen instead of responding or reacting, and they sit in a space of curiosity. They acknowledge people for sharing. They make sure people have the opportunity to contribute something that someone else may have shared, and spend less time talking and more time listening and observing in meetings. Now, that's helpful from a leadership point of view or a company point of view, but from an individual permission point of view, for most of us, speaking up in a meeting is quite intimidating, especially when there are important people involved, the kind of people that have say on your pay, your promotion, or future opportunities. So we kind of feel so much could go wrong. And, I know I have worried about saying the wrong thing, getting talked over in a meeting, being ignored, maybe freezing under pressure. What about you? What do you worry about? So let's have a look at, from an individual permission, how can we help ourselves have more permission when it comes to speaking up and having an uncomfortable conversation? So the first thing you can do is ask yourself the question, why is it important to you? Why does it matter? If you understand why it's important for you to share, you then build a sense of purpose for actually having that conversation. It builds your confidence. The importance of preparing in advance, you can either write bullet points down and just make sure you have them with you at a meeting, or even write them during the meeting, just a couple of quick things so that you've got it there with you. You're not worried about what you're going to say. You already know what you're going to share. Knowing that timing is critical. We can all have really, really good ideas, but we need to know what is the right time to interrupt if we should interrupt. So we need to read the room and really understand what's going on. Know who you're speaking to is the fourth one. After your communication, you need to alter your communication delivery based on the person. How do they react and respond? What are the cultural norms where you come from? Different in different countries. And then pause and breathe. This is your most valuable asset when it comes to courageous conversations and having that uncomfortable conversation. So how do we actually have those courageous conversations? I've shared a lot about the why, we've talked about why it's important, etc. But how do we actually speak up and have that conversation? And this can either be in a one-on-one or a group meeting situation, but we're going to show you some techniques now that help you to go through a courageous conversation. So it's one technique here. First, you need to create a slight interruption, to create a space in a conversation. Give people time to stop. Now, interruption examples could like raising a hand or saying, I just need to mention, or it could be, Diana, if I may. And that interruption is very much specific to you, what is acceptable in your culture. Some cultures might be hierarchical, but you will know what is and isn't acceptable in a way to interrupt. But we need to do that first. And then we go into the technique. So let's have a look at the technique. So once we've created the interruption, we next need to pause, and we kind of set a serious tone in a way, because pause gives you authority. It allows people to stop and listen. And we all know that pausing is one of the most powerful tools when it comes to communication. So we need to pause, give that space, create the energy in the room, then introduce the subject, what you want to share. And it needs to be a short sentence, straight to the point. We cannot kind of babble on too much here. And we need to approach this in a way where we separate the problem. So some really good ways to start these sentences are, I would like to share an observation. I feel, I have noticed. What if we could? Have we considered? So as you notice, these all separate the problem from the person. If you said, you did this, you did that, or why are we doing this? It now creates a personal attack. So we need to sit in that space of separating the problem from the person. We then need to state the issue. So describe in 1 to 2 sentences what you are uncertain about or uncomfortable about, unsure about, or what is the thing you have a different perspective on. Then pause and allow that to sink in. Give it time to sink in, allow people to think. And then the final part here, provide detail or further response if appropriate. You don't always have to do this. So it depends how the people have responded or reacted to this. So an example of this could be, and this is an uncomfortable example, what I observed yesterday was, now that didn't go down well with either myself or the team. I noticed their reactions. What I witnessed there was obviously that off-color joke that she told was not acceptable. Not only within our organization, but with our fellow team members as well, right? So that could be an example of the detail that is required. Okay, so a really, really strong and powerful tool. If you want to take a screenshot, you can, etc. We will make sure those that have attended, you'll get the video, but also we'll send through the slides in case you haven't picked everything up. But I want to just finish off here also when not to speak. And it's important to understand that sometimes we shouldn't speak. And here's just 3 times where I feel it's not important to speak. There might be others, and you can put them in the chat if you feel like it. The first one is if you feel that the comment would be better off having a one-on-one conversation. The second one is if you're trying to show off and show that you have good knowledge or you know better than everyone else. So just make sure you reflect first. And if you're trying to empower others on the team, it's not always a good idea to speak up in that situation. So you need to choose the time right. And it's really, really important you read that really, really well. Now, having the confidence and understanding when you have permission to have courageous conversations, how can we create a culture where people feel encouraged, accepted, and expected that people speak up when they feel uncomfortable, unsure, or have a different perspective. As I mentioned earlier, we have a program that we deliver with a number of companies around the world. It's quite popular right now, called Leading Powerful Conversations. It not only includes the courageous conversations, what we looked at today, but also goes beyond that into areas such as leading conversations with assertiveness and respect for authority, dealing with negative reactions, respectfully saying no while maintaining the relationship, how to deliver and receive effective feedback, how do we handle different conversations, or how might we even address behavior that may not be appropriate. So there's some of the things that are included in those programs. What I want you to do right now is place in the chat, what is the one thing that resonated with you the most? Pop it in the chat. What is the one thing that resonated with you the most today? Pop that in the chat. So important when you're thinking about those uncomfortable conversations. We need to be courageous and make sure we're having conversations, not confrontations. Gabby, starting the conversation, remembering to pause, great. How to set the tone, Andrew, the technique demonstrated. Excellent, Diana. Ruby, technique around starting a conversation. Paval, separating problem from a person. Awesome. There's lots in here. Great, keep them coming. It's been an absolute pleasure being with you today and sharing around handling courageous conversations. I'm now going to hand over to B, who's going to close out today's session. So thank you all for joining.